Hello and welcome back to another Python tutorial episode on Tkinter. Today, as the title of our video suggests, we are going to look at two more useful widgets, which is a text box and an associated scroll bar. We can start with the first one first by writing text as a name for our variable and then saying that this is equal to tk.text, and we will give it two inputs. One is obviously root, which is our root window. And then we will say that, for example, height is equal to 8. And that's 8 lines of text. Then we will, of course, say text.pack. Now that we've done this, we of course need to insert some form of text into the text box. We can do this by writing text.insert. And then first and foremost, we must tell our code where to start writing our text within the text box itself. We can do this by giving the insert command a string argument, which can be, for example, 1.0. And what this means is it will start writing in line 1, character 0. In other words, in the top left-hand corner of our screen. Of course, we could give it line 15, for example, and character 25, and that would be 15.25. Finally, of course, we should write the text that we actually want to insert inside the text box. And we can do this by giving the insert command another argument, which is our text as a string. We can write, this is our first text box. And that's it. Now, if we run the code, you can see that we've created a text box in which in the first line, starting from the first character, we have written, this is our first text box. Now then, as I'm sure you can imagine, a text box is something we can edit within the GUI. So we might wish to retrieve the data that's written inside the text box. For example, if we're using it to allow our user to input custom pieces of text into our code. To retrieve the text, all we need to write is retrieved text, and this can be the name of our variable, and then we say text.get, and then we have to give it two arguments. The first is where to begin reading our text, and for example, in this case, we can say 1.0, so line 1, character 0, and then we have to tell it where to stop reading. In this case, we can simply write end. So we are giving it free range to read until the end of our text. Of course, for whatever reason, we may wish to also disable the possibility for our user to input custom pieces of text into the text box, or indeed modify in any way what we've already written as a default. This can also be done quite simply by saying text state equals disabled. And this will disable the possibility for our user to edit or modify in any way the text which is written inside the text box. Now we've seen how to configure a standard text box as well as change some of its key parameters, so now we will instead move on to looking at a scroll bar and how to associate this with the text box we've just created. Now before doing that, we should configure this text box slightly differently and say that instead of text.pack, we will write text.grid, and this will then contain row equals 0 and column equals 0, and finally sticky equals east-west. Now, should you wish to revise how to use the grid command, I've created a dedicated tutorial on this topic, which I strongly encourage you to watch. I'll leave a link to it for you in the top of your screen, so make sure to check that out at the end of this video. Now, instead, we need to create our scroll bar variable. So we can call this scroll, and that will be equal to tk.scrollbar, or better still with a capital S, scrollbar, and then we can say root, and then orient equals vertical, and then we can say scroll dot grid again, and this time it will be row equals 0, column equals 1, and then sticky equals north-south. Then, in addition to the previous arguments, we can also say within the tk.scrollbar widget that command is equal to text.yView. Then we also need to add that text yscroll command is equal to scroll.set. Now these two commands are what link our text box and the scroll bar. So basically, depending on whatever position the scroll bar is in, our text box will orient itself accordingly. Then, as a final input, we also need to tell our text box what to display, or at least give it some default value to display. So we can write simply for I in range 1 to 30, we can say that P, short for position, is equal to an F string of I, 0.0, and then we can say text.insert our P, so for position, and then we can say that the text itself is another F string, and we can say this is row I, and then finally we also need to tell it our /n, which means go to a separate row. Now with that, we can run the code, and we can see that we now have a text box and a scroll bar next to it. Of course, if we move the scroll bar up and down, our text box will likewise move up and down accordingly. Now with that, I hope you can see that as the tutorials go on, we are slowly building up to more and more complex widgets. In this case, we even have a combination of two widgets, a text box and a scroll bar, linked together by the scroll command. I look forward to seeing what all of you come up with, and indeed if you have any questions, then as usual, please leave them in the comments down below. Thank you all for watching, and until next time, don't forget to like, share and subscribe, and happy coding!